that number one?
Okay, I show 7 o'clock, folks. We're ready to start?
I don't think there'll be, no.
So who's building a house up your place?
Okay, we're on. Good evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's Master Plan Update Steering Committee meeting. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Mike, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, folks, tonight on the agenda we have committee business. We'll look at our minutes, approve them, and then public input. We'll move on to Mark Rassicott. He's the Director of MAPC, Land Use Planning Director. Metropolitan Area Planning Council is what MAPC stands for. He's going to give us an introduction to MAPC. He's going to look at the organization and how it's going to help us in our master plan update process. The scope of services when we look at RFPs, requests for proposals, RFQs, requests for quotes. We're going to have questions and discussions, and certainly free form as we go along. Next steps, then we'll look at the outreach update, where we are there. Board committee visits, and there'll be more on that and what we're looking at to do with those board and committee visits. Our next steps, any other public input that may be there, and then we'll adjourn. So, with that, has everybody had an opportunity to see the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Do we have a motion?
Move that we accept the minutes of the May 26th meeting as presented.
Second.
There's a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous 4. Thank you. Public input. Kirby, you up there? I'd like you to scan the audience one more time, please, as we did last week. And we're going to do this till we get a full room, and then we'll really proudly scan the room. Folks watching on television out there in the public land, please, come on, this is ours. This is our town. We're all working together on this. So you can see the seats aren't full today. Come out and fill them up, please, and give us that input. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Rassicott from MAPC. What I'm going to do, ask you to give a brief introduction, and then I'm going to ask each of the members to give you just a very short, brief introduction of themselves to you so you know what kind of background we're dealing with here. Understand there's 4 other members. We're a 12-member board total. We still have 1 vacancy to fill, so there's 11 total of us, and this evening you have 7 of us here to entertain, so to speak.
You like me at the mic?
Probably, and then we'll make sure we hear you on TV, so if you want to move up, whatever you're comfortable with as far as that goes, though, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Rassicott. I am the Director of the Land Use Division at MAPC. Metropolitan Area Planning Council is the regional planning agency that serves the 101 cities and towns of the greater Boston region. We do everything from transportation planning to open space planning on a regional level to working with communities, groups of communities on planning projects, to work with communities on energy projects now. That's a recent item. We do collective purchasing for communities or groups of communities. We have a public health division that assists communities in public health issues. So we've grown considerably over the last 10 years. If you bumped into MAPC about 10 years ago, we're very, very different than we were then. We now have a staff of about 60 professional planners, which is about twice where we were 10 years ago. We have grown at least partially because of a federal grant that we received a few years ago that enabled us to staff up to better serve communities at that time and do a series of projects. And we've been able to maintain that level of funding and staffing because of the additional work that we're doing regionally and with our communities. So we've got a much broader and deeper staff than we did about 10 years ago, and we can handle just about anything folks ask us for. In addition, we have subregions. Keith is the chairman of the Minuteman area subregion called MAGIC. And they meet on a monthly basis and talk about issues of intermunicipal significance. They have a legislative breakfast on an annual basis, sometimes twice per year. We're a very diverse and growing agency that whose goal is to promote smart growth and regional collaboration within the 101 cities and towns. So that's about MAPC. I've been in MAPC about 18 years. I started as an open space planner. I've worked my way into working with people on economic development, do a lot of work with zoning. We've done some work out here in Littleton on a couple different zoning projects over the years. In my real life, I'm a newly retired Boy Scout leader. 10 years I was dealing with Boy Scouts, just retired from that this year. So that's me. And
This is a short synopsis of,
John, who I am?
yeah, that'd be good, yes.
Okay. I'm John. I'm a Littleton resident. I've lived here since '85. And,
You're a realtor.
well, I'm a realtor and a handyman.
Gary LaCroix, resident since '93, have a relatively young family. And they've pretty much all grown up here for the most part. And my background, I have a engineering, I'm a project manager / engineering background with the federal government.
My name's Ed Kuykendall. My wife and family and I moved here in 2010. My wife actually grew up in Littleton, and then we decided to move back in this area. I'm a landscape contractor. Some of the things that I really like about Littleton is it feels a lot like the town I grew up in. I think 20 years ago it was probably a lot more like the town I grew up in. And planning to stay here, I'd like to see it kind of have that rural character, but we can kind of afford to live here. And there's a great customer base, too, for a company like mine. So I'm very interested in helping Littleton achieve its goals as far as, community planning.
My name is Mike Fontanella. I've been here for 16 years. I've been on the school committee for 10 years, and I'm currently the chair of the school committee. So I'm representing the school committee on this task force. I know, right?
Hey, Mark, I remember you through some of the earlier go-arounds with the overlay district zoning and then the like. I was just an active citizen at that time. I've served on a number of different boards, presently on the Finance Committee. I've lived here since 1962. Have a consulting practice focusing on permitting and marketing.
Peter Scott, self-employed on the planning board, got roped in. Say that out loud again.
Don't you volunteer? Kindly.
About the same number of years, but he's been here his whole life. I've been here about 62 or 3 years. No, not that long. Since 62? I'm not that old. But that's, I would also like to see Littleton stay affordable. So when I pass on, my kids can afford to stay here.
Paul Abella. I've been in town 11 years, retired Air Force after 32 years. Still contract out to the federal government, so when it comes to acquisition sorts of activities, RFQs, RFPs, my experience is more at the federal level. I've served on a couple of other committees to include the school committee here, our permanent municipal building committee, where we did certainly some RFQ type work there also as we went on. So the show is yours, sir.
Okay. Well, Keith asked me to come tonight to talk a little bit about master plans and how MAPC does master plans, and to provide maybe a little bit of input on RFQs and RFPs. Starting with the RFPs, you've got a great list on your website of recent RFPs. I looked through that. The only one I could add was Hudson. I gave that to Maren, so that'll probably go up on your website soon. You've got a good diversity of sizes of communities there. I guess what I would say is I would encourage you to look at those and take from them the sections that you think will get you the plan that you want. Master plans are not all the same. There are certain core elements that they all have, because there are, within the master plan legislation at the state level, there are certain core elements such as economic development, housing, natural resources and cultural resources, a visioning section, et cetera. a circulation section. Those are all pretty standard. But we've been working with communities, or we've seen communities that have added things like an energy section on sustainability. In Swampscott, they've added their hazard mitigation plan, all hazard mitigation plan to their master plan. We have been working with other communities that have incorporated, for instance, in Boxborough, we had just recently completed some energy planning, so that will be brought into their master plan. It's not part of the RFP, but it will be brought in. So you can change things around. You can put different emphases on your master plan. You can make your master plan be the type of process that you want. And I'm going to say this now so I don't forget it, because I'm likely to forget it. The process is part of the product. Sure, you're going to wind up, no matter who does your master plan, and believe me, MEPC would love to work with you on it. We can talk about that a little bit later, but regardless of who you have to do your master plan, you're going to wind up with some great information on economic development. You're going to wind up with information on your housing. For instance, we've been working with you on your housing production plan, so that can get incorporated into whoever does your master plan. Obviously, we know it better, so we can incorporate it better, but, anybody can take that information. All that information is great information that will be put into your master plan product. But you have to remember the process is part of the product. And that's really critical, because what you want to build is you want to build a community consensus. You want to build the future voters at town meetings understanding of why you're doing a master plan. You want to build their understanding of why you're doing certain elements of a master plan and how you got to the end that you got to. If people understand the process and have participated in the process, you get to the end. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect. It's not going to be 100% consensus around your action items, but you'll have some plurality there. Hopefully, when you go to town meeting to take actions on that, where you need a 2/3 zoning vote, because people have participated in the process, they will understand why you are doing what you're doing. Likewise, they will also understand when the Board of Selectmen changes priorities for a given year to follow the master plan, people in town will understand why you're doing that, why they're doing that. They'll understand why the money is being spent in a certain way, or why the town is going after certain grants but not others. You only have a certain amount of time. The staff only has a certain amount of time to go after grants. So it's a question of what are you going to chase? What are you going to do? How are you going to spend your Community Preservation Act money? You've got 3 options under there. Is going to be an emphasis on open space or affordable housing or historic preservation. All of this is a part of the process. And that, if I don't say anything else tonight, please remember that, because that, I think, is really important. And it gets to some of the other stuff that I want to say, which is really about inclusiveness in the process. If you have had the chance to read the document that Maren only sent out yesterday, because I only got it to her yesterday, partially because it's hot off the presses, but this is a document that describes MAPC's master plan processes. And in there, it talks a lot about public participation and the need for broad and deep public participation. In some communities, that may mean, for instance, where we're working in southeastern Framingham, we're going to be doing work in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. The work that we did in Quincy was in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English. That was a tricky one, trying to get the PowerPoints in 3 different languages. Actually, 2 languages for the PowerPoint, 3 languages for translation. But in Littleton, it may not mean that. You know, you have probably a more uniform population as far as first language. But what you may have problems with is getting the youth involved, getting seniors involved, getting your farm community involved. There's still a lot of diversity here, and you've got to figure out how to reach all of those folks. Marion sent out the minutes of the last meeting, and one of the things on it was the stakeholder groups and the method of outreach. It's a great start. It's a great start to start listing all of those. I mentioned earlier, I'm an ex-Boy Scout leader. You've got Boy Scouts down the hall here, right? Boy Scouts aren't on here yet, okay? Get those folks on here. Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge, they can get out there and they can help you beat the bushes, getting people to the meetings. You know, getting youth involved. We've done things, and again, I'm telling you this not just to promote MAPC, but also to give you ideas about what you could put into your scope as you write a scope for the master plan. Because you can say, oh yeah, Rassicot talked about that. That's not a bad idea. We've done things like Photo Voice in the city of Malden, where the throwaway cameras gave those to youth and had them go around taking pictures of their community to get them to show what it was that they felt was most important about their municipality. And then that became part of the displays. That went up on the website. That got people involved. You know, there are many people who work a couple different jobs. They can't always make it to meetings. How are you going to reach out to them? You know, using social media to get out to them, using the web, using the various other means of social media. And you know, we've done work in that using Twitter and Facebook and that kind of stuff. We've got folks that specialize in doing that. I am not a Twitter user, but many people that work for me are. There are online polls that can be done. One of the procedures that Matt Smith has recently done in Swampscott, where he's doing master plan work, is he's got a website set up for the project, and everything he does at a meeting, if he's polling people at a meeting or trying to gain consensus at a meeting, that goes up on the website afterwards, so that people who were not at the meeting are able to give their input and, you know, either support or not support what was raised at the meeting. So you want to do as much of that stuff as you possibly can. Okay. What I think I really want to do, because I just started rambling there, because I get excited about this stuff. I'm sorry. What I really want to do is, I think, talk a little bit about, let me talk, again, a little bit more about MAPC for just a minute. You know, we've been around since the 60s. We've gone through various stages. We're right now embarked on 4 different master plans. We didn't always do master plans. Back around 2004, we worked with about 20 different communities on these mini master plan projects. This is a kind of our more recent history. In the distant past, in the 60s, we did a lot of master plan work. But in the more recent history, the community development plans, which were paid for by the state at that point, we worked on about 20 of these with communities. Those were economic development, open space, housing, and visioning, and then pulling it all together. These were great little plans. And why they were great little plans was they were quick hits. You got people excited. You got them to come to meetings, and there were quick action statements afterwards. And the goal was that everything got put on an 11 by 17 poster at the end. So it's the refrigerator plan. People could have it, they could hang it on the refrigerator, and they could see what the outcomes were, what the main priorities were. Not everything was listed there, but you know, it showed where communities said they wanted to grow, where they wanted to protect, economic development areas they might want to rezone. That's the kind of stuff that was put on those plans. They were very simple, but they were very effective because it's now more than 10 years later, and we're still working with communities on implementing those plans. Sounds like a long time, But as you know, town meeting happens once, maybe twice per year, depending on the town. You don't usually get more than one zoning article at a time going through town meeting if it's a big, complicated one. So it takes a while to implement these plans. As I was explaining earlier, before the meeting started, we're now seeing a lot of communities say, all right, 2004, we want to do more planning. Let's get back in and do some more master planning, because we've done a lot of implementation on those. So let's move on. So we're seeing a lot of communities move ahead with new master plans at this particular time. Since 2004, MAPC worked with the city of Malden on their master plan, very, very big, complex project. The lesson that I'd say there is plan for the big crowd. We planned for a couple hundred people at the first visioning session. We had 350 people show up at the city hall. It was great.
Excuse me, what's the population of Malden? What's the population?
Malden is about 50,000.
50,000, how many people should have
About
been?
350 at that particular visioning session. We were very happy with that turnout. If we had had more, we couldn't have handled it. As a matter of fact, we were using basement rooms in the town hall for extra breakout sessions. We called on members of the Master Plan Steering Committee to facilitate additional discussions. So plan ahead for big enough space and contingencies of what happens if you get more people coming. Interestingly, in Malden, what we did was we followed up that big session with ward-level visioning, because they had 8 wards in Malden, and we subsequently grouped 2 wards together in each of 4 additional meetings. And we had about 60 or 80 people show up at each of those meetings, many of whom didn't come to the first one, because they didn't feel comfortable going to town hall, but they felt very comfortable going to the neighborhood schools. So anyways, we've done that. We've done a lot of work recently. As I said, we're currently working in Boxborough, Swampscott, Woburn, and we're about to start Melrose. We're doing part of the visioning work in Ashland as part of getting their plan going. So what I handed out, or what I gave to Maren yesterday, is something that we were asked to put together by the city of Revere, because they've asked us to come talk to them about doing a master plan. And they wanted us to show what a master plan process led by MAPC would be like. I had previously given to Keith, back in March, a scope of a master plan based upon how much money I thought you had available. And honestly, it took a lot of pencil sharpening to get it within that amount of money. But
Excuse me, can you
Yeah.
say that again? You did,
back in March,
yeah?
I gave Keith a sort of a scope for doing a master plan in Littleton. And at that point, I was under the impression you had about $110,000, $113,000, something like that. And so I did put together a scope of what I thought we could do at that particular point for $113,000. As I'll explain more in a minute, master plans can cost anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000, depending upon the degree of, largely the degree of public participation that the community wants. Running meetings, doing a lot of outreach takes a lot of time. Getting people to write press releases, getting people to work on literally knocking on doors of businesses to get the business community to come out. Going out to the meetings of the Rotary Club or the Little League or whoever. If that's included in the consultant's time, it costs money. On the other hand, that's something that the Master Plan Steering Committee can do and can save the town a lot of money. And so you want to perhaps work with a consultant who's going to give you enough information so that you guys can go out and do a lot of that. So I think if I could, what I'd like to do is just make sure everybody's got a copy of the material that Maren sent around. And I'd just like to quickly go through that. Here, Richard.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So while that's going around, I'll wait just a second. As the first section of this basically is 2 pages about how MAPC does a standard process. The back 7 pages is from the scope that we are actually undertaking for the town of Swampscott. So it provides you with some basic information about our process and then a specific project that we're doing. The first page, generally just about the fact that you want a team. If you want, like I said, MAPC can do this, but you can work with others as well. But whoever you choose, yes.
How much is the town of Swampscott spending?
Swampscott put up $125,000, and MAPC is putting in $20,000 to assist. So it's about a $145,000 plan. Okay? And if you compare this to the Boxborough plan, for instance, which is about a $90,000 plan, but they had done some work ahead of time. They had recently completed their open space plan. They had completed some modeling of future land uses, et cetera. So that knocked it down. But also, you'll see a lot more meetings, public forums, and meetings with the master plan committee in the Swampscott plan than there could be afforded in the Boxborough plan. So that's one of the main differences that you'll notice.
How do you gauge what you cost? I mean, at the end of the year, they say, okay, I put in 50 hours, I want
Now,
$5,000, you want,
now MAPC,
how do you equate your?
we bill all of our hours to projects. Although we are a government agency, we're unlike most other government agencies in that we have to bill all of our time to a project, even if that's a project that is funded by the federal government transportation money that we have. We have to bill all of our hours every week. So we know our costs, and when we're working on a project, we bill actual hours on a project. So what we do when we are developing a scope is that we will work with the community and discuss with them the number of hours that we think it will take to undertake various elements, and we hope we get it right, because we can't lose.
Well, there's a number associated with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a government employee, so I suppose we
Yes.
could look this up if we wanted to, right?
We bill at between $70 and $100 an hour,
Okay.
and that covers not only staff time, but all of our overhead, like lights and rent and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so, as you said, sometimes you send guys out to knock on doors. Are these
Yes.
$70 to $100 an hour people also, or are these,
Yes.
so everyone gets billed out the same amount, regardless?
No, I get billed out at a higher rate than some of the junior staff.
in
So
other
that
words,
they'd be
other
at the
people do
70
get
and I'd
billed
be
out
at
a
the.
lower rate?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But the lowest
But
rate
but
is
the
$70.
the lower rate is about 70, because it does include the overhead for the agency.
That's my experience working with professional consultants, that's on the low end of the range.
Yeah.
If you hired an AE firm, it would be typically more like $1,000 a day.
Want to know what I can do to make my knuckles bleed knocking on doors? I can make $140K a year just knocking on doors. I'll do that all day long.
We don't make that, that's, like I said, that's the overhead as well.
See, being self-employed, I know that I don't make all the money I charge per hour.
There you go.
It goes to a bunch of other places.
Yeah.
But I do know that when I hire somebody to do work for me, I know I'm paying out that amount. So
Yep.
it's not necessarily that you get to spend it all yourself, but
Right.
I know I don't have it anymore.
Right?
I lost all of it to paying you guys, so.
Yep.
That's how I keep an eye on where my money goes.
We pay that for carpenters.
That's not, just want to know.
Now, if you make a proposal
Yes.
for a particular cost for a particular project, and it runs longer hours,
We eat the cost,
okay.
Yes.
yeah.
Unless there was some kind of scope change that we needed.
Unless there was a scope change, exactly. I mean, if there was a change to the contract, But, that's why we have to estimate accurately, just like anybody else.
So the nature of your contract's a typical negotiation, because this is a government-to-government relationship, right? So it's, or is it a...
There's two ways of doing things with MAPC. One is that we can do a government-to-government contract without going through a 30B RFP process. We do that where communities are certain they want to work with us, where we've generally done work in the past, where the communities are comfortable doing that. In other cases, for instance, in the case of the city of Woburn, they felt more comfortable going through an RFP process, and we responded. And they hired us through that process. So we can do it either way. In the case of the Woburn RFP, we put together a response, told them what we could do for what we thought they had for money, and they thought we were the best alternative. In the case of community that just wants to start negotiating with us, we can do that, and there's no obligation on the part of the community to carry it forward. If you look at it at the end of the day and say, you know what, looks okay, but maybe we're going to do an RFP anyways. I mean, obviously, I don't want to waste too much time doing that, because got other things to do, but, we'd certainly be interested in talking with you about it if that was something you wanted to do.
And if you're doing a direct, that's typically how it's been, it's not been like a, we'd ask you for a project scope, you'd provide proposal, and then it'd be some back and forth, that's typically how it's been.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you can see in this document, in the beginning of the second section, the planning process and public participation, we really try to scope the document to what the needs of the community are. If you feel that a major issue is outreach to seniors, or if you really want emphasis on the economic development element and want us to spend more time doing market research and perhaps even a market analysis, that can be incorporated. If it can vary. If you want to have an extra public forum at the end because you really feel that the public process is an important element, that can be added in, and maybe something else gets taken out so that we still fit within the budget range that you're comfortable with.
So what would the difference be if the town of Littleton dealt with an organization like yours as opposed to, a private sector company?
No difference if you wanted to bid it out,
Okay.
because we would be equal to them in the RFP process. The difference is, because of the procurement laws in the state of Massachusetts, governments can contract with governments without going through that process. So you could enter into an agreement with us without going through the bidding process. And that's the sole difference, if you wanted to save the time and the money of going through that bid process.
Wouldn't you also, sorry to interrupt, wouldn't you be also at the benefit of, you are a nonprofit, so you would be theoretically, 10% or whatever that profit margin, you're not carrying that profit margin, is that correct?
Well, we don't make a profit. And as some folks have noted, we, I think, are less expensive than many consultants. I'm not going to say all, but I think we are less expensive than many because we don't build in a large profit margin. We do have a diverse staff with expertise in housing, as you know, because we've done the housing production plan out here, economic development, transportation, open space, et cetera. So we've got a large group. And we are fairly familiar with the town, given the fact that we've done a lot of work in the past. But
You should come in rock bottom.
I like the way he thinks.
No, you really don't.
The question is,
Yeah.
because of the length of this, if you set up a scope, but some state or federal mandates come down and the scope has to change, do we incur that cost?
Let me think about that for a second. So let me think. Assuming that
Well, he's
the
hoping
only legislation that I can think of that would change it would be the Zoning Reform Act. It might change what goes into a master plan. And they've been talking about that for about the last 25 years at the state, and it hasn't gone anywhere.
That's
So
about the
I-
rate of accomplishment, isn't it? 25 years to get something done?
I don't think the legislation's going to change in the next year on what goes into a master plan. So I think you're okay.
Pretty stable.
I think, yes.
Stagnant. Stagnant. That's the
Well-
right word.
And it depends on, what your perspective is. Sometimes the best change is no change.
That's right. Hopefully.
Now, the nature of how you construct these contracts, I imagine that the cost for facilitating a meeting or something like that may be relatively well-defined, you need to facilitate a forum or something like that. I was wondering if we decided further on down the road that, we like to do, we want to add another one because we just felt, as it evolves. Have you had contract relationships where you'd establish like an option price for certain types of things?
We could certainly do that. But, it really depends on the type of meeting that you're thinking of. For instance, we've done a very large group facilitation where we have small group discussions, breakouts, and we bring a lot of staff to those. We also depend upon master plan committee members to help facilitate tables. But, if you've got a very large group, you've got to have a lot of staff. On the other hand, we've recently been doing a combination, some of those, but also then sort of a more open house kind of a thing, which is, from 6 to 9 p.m. on a given evening, we'll have an open house in the school cafeteria or something like that, where we will have stations, sort of education stations, where there'll be information for folks. There might be a PowerPoint that's on a recurring loop that will have audio on headphones, so people can sit down every 15 minutes. It'll come back on so people can look at that. And so it's more of a self-guided kind of a process, and people can give us feedback, written feedback. Some folks like that better, or they like to mix it up. They like to have the big forums, and then they like to have these smaller open houses, because there's a variety of reasons. One, they're a little bit cheaper to run, but really the main reason is they want to try to build the number of people who can participate. If you're going to do a forum from 7 to 9 and people have to be there for that whole time, they got to get home from work, they got to eat, they got to get babysitters. It's not easy. But if they can go for an hour on the way home from work before they go home to eat, they can go through, they can give their feedback, and then they don't have to be there for the whole time. So it's another way of trying to get more people to participate. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. But yes, we can provide an alternative cost for adding different types of sessions.
They have to be well-defined, obviously, under certain assumptions, but
Yes.
yes, yeah.
This is more curiosity, but what's the linkage in measurable terms between extended participation of a community and the subsequent success as measured by let's say economic development-centered plan, housing, and open space. Let's pick those three.
Okay.
And let's say for whatever reason, participation by the public is limited to 0.5%.
Yeah.
Is there anything on your books that would suggest that with such low participation, low interest, and the focus of the plan, what was the outcome?
Okay. I don't have scientifically analyzed answer, but I can give you a couple of anecdotal answers. So I haven't done a survey.
No, forget anecdotes. What I'm interested in,
Okay.
you do place a heavy emphasis on participation, and intuitively it seems obvious.
Yes.
And I'm just interested in the linkage,
Yeah. Well,
the real linkage, not the anecdotal one, the real one.
okay. Well, let me answer it, and you tell me if it's real, okay? I will tell you that I live in the town of Stoughton. MAPC did, in the year 2004, the community development plan for the town of Stoughton. There were several very well-attended meetings for that town, okay? We have a representative town meeting. We have a hard time getting a quorum for the 120 people we need. But we had several forums that had about that same number of people. Now, again, 30,000 people in town, 120 people showing up, not all the same people at each of the meetings, fairly low percent, but they were also well covered by the press. Plan is approved. Number one priority on the plan was change the zoning in the downtown. Was a single-use district in the downtown, commercial only. Kind of a weak commercial district. It is now a mixed-use district. There have been, the zoning was approved, went through town meeting. The zoning was approved. We have, well, we had more coming until the crash in '08, but it's now regaining momentum again. We've got about 5 new developments, 3 of which have been built, 2 of which are under construction, and actually there's another one that's permitted but not yet under construction, in the downtown. Okay, so that's somewhat anecdotal, but, you know, it's a real example. In the same plan, the number one priority for acquisition was the Glen Echo Pond area in northeastern part of Stoughton. Took 8 years, but when the land came up for purchase, when it became available, the town did buy it. It was, in between times, the town did pass the Community Preservation Act and did use CPA money to acquire that parcel. So those are a couple of examples. Closer to home, I would suggest that meetings that were held in this room that had far fewer people participating when we were talking about the downtown zoning and the Beaverbrook overlay, largely meetings of the planning board to which the selectmen came, and there were probably about 20 members of the public, maybe? The most. That came, yeah. And a lot of discussion, sometimes good discussion from the residents. Cynthia Wall and I went to town meeting, and some folks stood up at town meeting. This goes back 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah. Some people stood up at town meeting and said, first time I've heard about this, don't like it, what's going on? Other folks who had been sitting in these seats stood up and said, no. I went to those meetings. They listened to the people who were there. They got it right. Planning board's right on this. And
Emma, to the defense of the first person, whose obligation is it? Isn't it the obligation of the town boards and the consultants to make sure that first person who said first time I never heard about it in the first place?
yes, but my point is that even when you have a fairly small group of people who participate, they can influence votes.
Unduly influence the product, too. If you only had 20 people in the room,
Well,
then
I think that,
then an effort has to be made at some level to make sure that those folks don't have too much of a thumbprint on the product. Otherwise, you're not getting what really reflects the community. I mean, a process of opening the door and waiting for 20 people to show up is not the way of getting the true pulse of the town.
thank you, you're right. I neglected to say that we began the process with a big forum.
I know, I was at it.
Yeah, and we did get input from folks through that way as well as, in addition, through the website. But you're absolutely right. You do want to make sure that you get as many people there as possible.
Or otherwise get their input.
My sole point in raising it was that I believe that, at least I know when I was a town meeting member, I couldn't research everything. I couldn't participate in all meetings. When somebody I knew and trusted stood up at town meeting and said, I did participate in that, it's okay, I would generally listen to them, even though I couldn't have participated myself in those meetings. So,
But in your defense also, you can lead the horse to water. If people are not going to pay attention, not going to read what flyers that come out, and are not going to watch the TV, are not going to go to these meetings, you're not going to reach them. It's that simple.
Well, that excuse is always available, but I
I
think
know.
the obligation is to
Yeah,
try
I
to
mean,
get
we-
beyond that.
Well, that means we're out pounding on doors.
That's the challenge.
That's the challenge.
For this group, because as Mark recalls, there was a significant community involvement, public outreach, and it was done a lot of ways. It was the Littleton Common Village Overlay Zoning District Study lasted a couple of years, and there was a lot of community input involved, many meetings involved. But I think Mark's point was that when we got to town meeting, it was so well ingrained with many people in the community that we even had members of the community defending the work had been done, that the selectmen and the planning board were bringing forward to that zoning. And to Michael's question of the link between what you do in the planning and what you see in the real world, well, it's out on exit 31 on 495. The point would not be there had it not been for the planning exercise.
That may be a mixed blessing.
Well, I think that the point was more a product of the earlier work that was done by the planning board to give some of the, and the Board of Health for giving the sewer treatment plan approval, and the Board of Appeals for giving the height variance and the setback variance. A lot of that stuff to make the project attractive was already in place.
Mike's question is not without merit, but I would,
It wasn't, but
No, I'm,
I don't want to get in that sort of debate.
revisionist history.
For tonight, let's not get in that debate, guys. To Mike's question, it has merit, but realizing there's more than two variables involved in the question. Allow me one sec, because you had the opportunity to ask the question.
no,
So-
but my question has another part to it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Mike, let's take one at a time. Before you go into multiple part questions, let's work at one part at a time. Otherwise, we're skewed all over the place. And that's what a K, folks, skewed. Just in case my voice comes across poorly. When we look at those sorts of variables, you can come up with the best laid plan, okay? And we've heard that before. It's a cliche, the best laid plan of mice and men. The thing is, with bad execution, the best plan is not going to work. A mediocre plan, very well executed, can be very successful. But now to your point about 0.5%, actually the statistics you just gave came real close to that number if you did the math from the top of your head. You know you're capable of doing it. So by coincidence, perhaps, if not by design, his example came very close to your 1%. So you actually began answering somewhat empirically, which was what you wanted. But I think it was going down a road, perhaps the answer wasn't quite the way you wanted it framed, from an external viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that's why there was that extra discussion on it. But I would offer on this that those numbers will not be able to directly link to say, we spend 2 years here as 12 folks on the planning committee here, working with even hundreds of people, and then come 2030, something does or does not happen. To be able to say this dot to that dot, I would say is complete, total sophistry.
And I'm with you, that's not why I asked the question, that's why I said, okay. The difficulty I'm having with this approach, which I've seen, I'm sort of playing devil's advocate with you a little bit, mainly because you got your degree at Tufts and I used to be there. Okay, so it's in the same department too. Anyway, here's the question for you. In talking to, quote, other consultants, it's very interesting, when presented, and this seems to be characteristic of this group, and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just different. Other kinds of consultants, when presented with, you've got to get the public, you've got to get residents involved, they will know the number I just gave, which is not a coincidence. It's about 1.5% to 2% participation. And what they already know ahead of time, or their experience has been previous to entering the arena. This is what you do when you're trying to aim for this. What should be the balance? How do you reach it? And that's generally part of what goes into their, shall we say, their portfolio presentation. And what I'm struck by when I looked at the RFPs and when I looked at some of this material, your organization has the view, well, we're going to do outreach, and this is what we do. It's not so much, we know what the outreach could be. We know how passive the public can be on occasion. This is what we can do about it. This is our, shall we say, one of our strengths, or this is what we want to do. And this is one of my big concerns. I do want participation. I'm interested in framework that goes at this aggressively and understands it almost from the get-go, that 1.5% maybe what it is, can we push it, what do we have to do, what's the nature of the town, what are the demographics, what's sitting behind it? That was the reason for my question.
If I could. I would say that you guys know the town better than I do, even though I have been out here a lot. You would know how the townspeople respond to different things. In many communities, it's a case of not getting people to come to the meetings. You've got to go to their meetings and bring them information and ask them the questions, try to get them to provide input, and then you may get a couple of folks from that meeting to come to the big forum. But you're not going to get everybody. They don't have time. Their interests are elsewhere. And so it's a question of the effort that you think is necessary. And I am not going to tell you how much effort is needed, because you know best, how your town functions. How many people will it take to move things ahead, to have a groundswell at town meeting? And yes, realistically, it's a low percentage.
One concern I have is that you can have people who have strong opinions of things or strong agendas, they attend meetings. And they can steer the outcome of something, and then the majority afterwards figures out, like, how did we get here? And they didn't have any say in it. How do we get, I think the biggest challenge is how to get the majority of people in the discussion and decision-making, and not the ones that have selective, passionate things that they want to bring up.
If you figure that out,
I know,
you can
it's a
quit your
real
day job, my
challenge.
friend.
But you
can
see,
quit your day
but
job.
that happened with the crematorium study committee. We had a few people on that group that absolutely destroyed it. And had we implemented it, the town would have been in a positive cash flow with that item, up to $1 million a year after 10 years. But I mean, so it's just like an example of how that can destroy a good concept.
Because we don't have unlimited use of Mark's time, what I'd like us to be able to continue doing is consider him a resource, and what can he and MAPC bring to us and for us. And then we can look at some of those things and critique those ideas, positive or minus, whatever we think is appropriate. But for the moment, at least, because we really want to just mine the data in the brain.
Sure.
So that information you can give us, if you will, please.
Sure. Well, I'd like to answer the question, though, which, one of the things that you can do is to make sure you get the press at all the meetings, so that if people hear about the way it's going, people can say, oh, I guess I better go to the next meeting and let my voice be heard. You can do other forms of outreach. You can do web-based surveys. One of the things that I will leave with Maren, and I'm not going to pass it around now, but I'll just
You
leave.
provide tools like that, but,
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Should you be hired, you provide these tools, or you just
We can
do
give
it?
you examples, even if we're not hired. I
We
mean,
get them anyways,
we're your regional planning agency. We're here,
We'd
we'll
like to
we'll
see
help you
like
anyways.
ideas that
so you can be here next
that
week.
actually seem to have, good results.
Well, one of the things that
Such a hard-
I wanted to show, and I'll leave these around, these are the PowerPoints that we used at the visioning session, the follow-up session on economic development and housing, and the, let's see, I think that was it. Those are the two that I brought with me. The reason I'm bringing these is because, Maren, you can have those and send them around later. The second forum showed the results of the first one. So that we began by saying, this is what we heard at the last meeting. This seems to be the priorities we've heard so far. So that people could react to that and start to talk things up with their neighbors. We always like to try to find out who's in the room at these meetings. We use keypads that are anonymous, but we will ask questions. We will look at the demographics of the room versus the demographics of the community, and we'll ask people to think who's not in the room and let us know, so that maybe we need to do a little bit more outreach to, as I said, maybe the farm community, maybe the senior community, maybe the youth, maybe the young families who just don't have time to get to these meetings. And we've got to figure out, working with the committee, how to reach out to them. Again, any consultant you hire, you should make sure that you have them work with you on that, regardless if it's us or not. So anyways, this document, really is, I'll let you read it at your leisure. You can get questions to me through Keith. But basically, the emphasis is on, outreach, different types of things like website, blog, social media. One of the things we did in Ashland, for instance, in order to build momentum, for the initial forum, was to have a lightning poll. Every week, there was a new poll up on the website. One question: what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And we showed the results of those at the forum when people came in. They were on posters. But they were also on the website. Every week, people could kind of follow what was going on, and they could see what their friends and neighbors were saying. We have done things like, as I mentioned, the Photo Voice project, where we gave cameras to the kids. We've done forums working just with youth, working through a youth organization in one of the cities where we did some work. There's, we've gone to seniors' facilities and talked to them about it. Although they're not going to maybe be here in 20 years, they're very, very focused on leaving a nice community for their friends and neighbors and descendants. So again, it's a question of what you think will work best to get out to the majority of the community. And that's what should be built into your RFP, so that whoever responds to your RFP will be doing what it is you want. And if you want to work with MAPC, we could work with you on just drafting a scope that has that kind of stuff in it.
I did have a question for you, just as a homework or takeaway. I know if we're considering using you, could you provide some references of
course we can.
Towns that you've used? But
Sure.
I'm curious, actually, not just the ones that you did recently, because the proof's not in the pudding yet.
Right.
Ones that might be like 8 years old or something like that.
Right, we can do several things. I mentioned the master plans, the mini master plans, the community development plans that we did back around 2004. Since then, we've done a lot of work with communities on elements of master plans, housing production plans, economic development studies, open space and recreation plans, transportation work. So we can provide you with references on that kind of work as well.
On the pieces, but
Yeah.
has anybody, do you have any that would be of a general comparable size, for less than 15,000, that's within the last 10 years of a scope that's similar to what we're trying to do?
I think that what we'd probably do is provide you with something that's fairly far along, like the Woburn plan. And no, it's not done yet. But we could provide you with references in Malden, where we did a lot of visioning work in 1 year, followed it up with land use analyses the next year, and then, in fact, we wound up compiling their master plan, because some of their other work had been done by outside consultants. But we did compile the final plan, so we could give you references for folks there as well.
I'd be less inclined to know about other towns' master plans than I would be about other towns' successes in any kind of public outreach program. Whether it be a zoning change that needed to get people out there to vote, or anything.
Sure. And we could talk about, how we did it. For instance, I don't know why, but it just made me think of Duxbury. We just finished a project. Zoning hasn't moved ahead yet, but we did an economic development study in Halls Corner in Duxbury. It's a fairly small economic development spot, but it's the largest economic development center in the town. we were working with their Economic Development Committee. They didn't think they'd get much outreach. So what we wound up doing was we went to the grocery store. And we were outside the grocery store for a day, talking to everybody who went in and out. And the committee was very surprised when we held a forum that there was a room full of people. Now, a room full of people there was only about 35 people. But that was a room full of people. They were not expecting anybody to be there. But it's about the outreach. It's about how you think you can get it done.
Yeah, because I think it's less the size of the town and less about the actual element that you're working on, and more about how you achieve the goal of getting information out to people, getting the successes back.
Yeah.
My thoughts, anyway.
Well, Mark, if you think appropriate, what I'd like to do is go around the room, see if we have any questions. And some of the things, for example, what you guys just brought up, we write this down and we come up with a list too, and that we can pump on off and get some answers that way in addition to just, as this evening goes on. But what I'd like to do is, if you're all amenable to that, let's start with Mike.
No, I've been talking too much. We ought to start at the other end.
I'm also-
I'll wait till last.
I had thoughts relative to the RFP, RFQ process after having looked at what's on the website, not specific to what Mark said, although I'm very interested, and I'm happy to see, I can say this, a number of points you brought up are things that we talked about at earlier meetings that, I consider important in terms of approach, whether it being doing neighborhood subgroups rather than just a town-wide thing, the outreach thing, obviously, the creative and effective use of online capability with a weekly poll sounds like a great idea. The idea of keeping track of the demographics in a room, who's there, and just as importantly, who's not there. And then, I was happy to hear you advocate using not just the confrontational setup, but also the open house setting. I work with a lot of project proponents, and we always try to push that. It's just, it eliminates the room full of spectators and two, people arguing as opposed to everybody having a chance to engage the information. So, and I heard a lot of good things there, but I'll wait on the RFP, RFQ thoughts I have to later.
I've got a lot to learn.
Yeah, we all do.
It's amazing.
But any questions right now? Mike?
No, I don't have any questions right now. I think the next step that I'm thinking about is for us to think about RFP versus non-RFP and having a discussion amongst ourselves about what we think the best way to go about that is. And that's what I'd like to do at sometime in the near future.
I think my questions have been answered.
Gary?
I agree with Mike. I think that's pretty much the next step, is to figure out the pros and cons of the different approaches.
Yeah, and maybe when Mark responds to us, that we can tell us about the successes of other towns with other consultants too. If that's, broader, then we can get a better understanding of how that picture needs to look. Not trying to give away your business to somebody else, but.
Well, also, I would be, it's a little, I really shouldn't say who's the best consultant is, I will, however, steer you to the Massachusetts Association of Consulting Planners website, because they list the consultants by their specialty on the MACP website. Don't get it backwards or you'll wind up on my website.
APC?
No, it's Massachusetts Association of Consulting Planners, and I believe it is still a subset of the Massachusetts American Planning Association website.
Good. Yeah, good. That's a great resource.
So,
That'll help.
you'll find anything there from two-person shops to very large organizations.
How do you approach social media? Because I haven't heard that word used yet in terms of outreach.
Where were you last week?
Oh, no, in tonight's meeting. We were talking about it last week.
You came in late.
So the use of Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
apologize.
Facebook and Twitter is something that our communications staff is very good with. I personally don't use it. I'm old school. But we do have folks who send out tweets all the time from meetings and about meetings. email chains are a great way to do things. It's old school
We have
now.
one person sitting right behind you that.
Who's tweeting right
Very
now,
good at
probably.
that.
Mr. Real Time right behind you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Usually by the time I get home from these meetings, he's already got something on the website about the meeting I was just at. So,
Yeah, this is, you gave examples to me that I'm very interested in from reading some of your stuff, as it were, especially the housing production plan. It has to do with data, and it's, for Littleton, I have to call it granular data because Littleton generally doesn't fall into people's market research collection efforts automatically. In a specific example, I noticed in the demographic studies, I'm using the word broadly, that when in the housing production plan, you use the U.S. Census and something from the Commonwealth to do projections and estimates of the change in population in Littleton, which is quite dramatic. Okay. What I did notice, you have the same limitations the U.S. Census has, not because the U.S. Census is terrible, but because they're not as granular at the level. In fact, okay? And that is, how many, it's very nice to talk about social media, how many people, how many households are wired up in Littleton? Where do you get that data? It's not a rhetorical, I'm not trying to trap you, anything. It's that kind of information and the cost of getting that kind of granular information about the town of Littleton so we can, as it were, paint a more accurate picture, other than the one that's given us by what are called broad cut kinds of data. And I'm not,
I don't have an answer for you, but I can certainly talk to our demographers who are much brighter than I am when it comes to doing projections and gathering data. It's really pretty amazing the information that our data services team has available, and I can ask them about
right,
that.
challenge then to you is, I would really appreciate knowing how many households in Littleton are wired for, obviously, for internet.
All right, let me see what I can find. I'm not going to guarantee I'll get an answer.
Thank you on that. If I could bring this session to closure, and Mark, if you're amenable to this, I'm going to ask the folks that digest what you've said, what you've given us, and what Maren will pass out to us, and maybe we come up with some questions. Pass them to Maren, and Maren, if this is okay with you, please, maybe parse them a little bit, because we may ask the same question two different ways, and, put a little list together, and if you're up to this, please, we'd send that list to you, and then over a short period of time, and obviously, I know where we are as far as finances at this point, so the level of effort is understandable. At some point, you have to, knock it off.
It's all right.
No, we're all in business, we understand that.
He works for us already.
He's right.
Government, too.
But anyway,
But we could certainly pay
parsing this.
a short term, without committing anything long term, right, Keith?
these are all things, and these are exactly stuff to bring up, but at least a moment, and then, maybe perhaps before our next meeting, if we could have some responses that are at a level
Sure.
that...
When is your next meeting?
2 weeks. Exactly 2 weeks from tonight? It's the second.
23rd?
I tell her, not
Yeah, that's right, we're still in the same month. Thank you.
That's what I got.
Sure. I can do that.
So, over the next day or two, if you get it to Maren, are you in the office on Friday? So let's use Friday morning as a deadline for those. And whatever Maren has at that point, forward, please, to Mark.
Deadline for what? Deadline for what?
Ask that again?
No, deadline for what?
Those questions.
Setting questions.
That you may have. Okay, everybody amenable, then I'm going to close this section and we'll move on. And Mark, I want to thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me out.
Yeah, see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good to
On
see you
behalf of
again.
the committee and the entire town, thanks very much. Appreciate the work that MAPC has done for us already. Keith's a good steward helping us out here.
Good.
Okay, so folks, with that, and, Mike hit it, and then Gary built upon that a little bit, and that is for us to think through that the RFQ, RFP process, how we may want to go, how we may want to use MAPC, whether it is to help us develop the scope, whether it is to, before he walks out the door, say, you're on contract with us, or we take a little bit of time. Try and think, we stew on it a little bit, and we make this an agenda item at our next meeting, and I'd actually like to make it a vote at the next meeting as to how we want to proceed. And I think I see three options, and tell me if I'm wrong on this. One is we just straight up MAPC, help us, and we wash our hands of it, and we do what they tell us to do. The other is we use MAPC to do an RFP, and I think, and on the procurement, you perhaps know what the state procurement was better than any of us, and with Maren also, is if they do the RFP/RFQ and write the whole scope, does that bar them from participating in the RFP process?
I don't believe so, no.
At the federal level, it does, as we understand, but you know better at the state
Well,
level.
Keith would know flat, but I don't believe so.
So let's use that as an option. They help us with the scope, and they compete also. Or we, rig's the wrong word, we present it such that we just want their help scoping it, and then it goes out
And
for
helping
bid.
us select perhaps.
And
'cause
they-
then they'd
and they'd be on,
yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Right.
Use them, we call it the fair opportunity evaluation. That'd be a subset. We all would not sit on that, and that's something for us to discuss also. Do you think we could be ready to take that sort of vote next week, or 2 weeks from now?
I think I'd like to have some information on the references and some other types of things, because one of the benefits of going sole source in this case is to know exactly what you're getting. And so level of information that would be comparable to what we'd be asking for in the RFQ would be the same level of references and, feedback from other sources. So if we're going to go to that source directly, I'd want the same level of background information. So maybe a little quick to get that, because I'm not sure we'd get that turnaround within 2 weeks.
Now, the good news is we certainly have a track record with MAPC here in town. Folks who participate in the housing production plan, for example, know their work well, and there's certainly other examples in town. Keith is a good resource on this.
I'd also like to offer up a thought about that. If we are questioning them in that term, then the answer is obvious. Go to an RFP. And then you'll get all that information from all of them, and you can pick the best guy in the room.
I see what you're saying.
And at that point,
I can answer your question as whether I'd be available in 2 weeks. If we're gonna go an RFP, sure, because we're not, I would not be in a position to say in 2 weeks, sign up with these folks. I mean, I came into this process thinking the most important thing we could do is find the range of possibilities, and I'd hate to foreclose that.
Right, but at that point, what you're saying is that you would be comfortable voting to go for the RFP process
Right.
and excluding them as a direct hire.
Yes.
Which you could make that decision without knowing anything more about them.
Right.
Correct.
Right, that
You know what I'm
allows us to
saying?
collect
So
more
I'm saying
data
that
and filter more
if you are a
companies, right?
person who thinks that we would benefit, the MP, whatever our acronym is, would benefit by not having to go through an RFP process, then I think it's fairly straightforward. These guys do this. I think we would be fine as long as you are okay not evaluating all the other alternatives. It sounds like many of it, not many of us, but maybe some of us already made our decision on that. That's fine. But I'm not going to, if I'm going to evaluate them, I want to evaluate everybody. And if I'm going to dig down into them, then I'm going to dig down into everybody else. If I'm comfortable eschewing that process, they're just as good as anybody else. They're the only ones we could really do it because they're the only government-to-government entity that does this work. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's my understanding.
So at that point, you're just eschewing the RFP process because you think that there's a
Right.
benefit inherent in doing that. And these guys have a track record both in terms of doing this work and with Littleton doing similar types of projects.
But I don't care what the track record is, it's what we want.
I understand that.
So-
So then you would say,
So I'm
then
defending
go
you.
to the RFP and evaluate a dozen, which is fine. That's a perfectly reasonable point of view.
Yeah, I
But
think it
don't
takes
think-
longer, but I think it's necessary.
Yeah,
And
and-
I'm not trying to get anybody, I don't want anybody to say, oh, you're right, let's just go for the RFP. That's
And-
not
and
what I'm
it-
trying to drive the process in. I'm just saying that I don't need to see their track record to say, if we're going to eschew the RFP process, they're fine.
I don't want to, I spin,
just don't have to evaluate.
I spin it a different way. And that is, I haven't worked with these guys. I'm going to rely on the information, I would ask anybody who has worked with them, either in the town or outside the town, just to, what their background is. But if I am going to bypass a regular competitive thing, I just want some level of comfort.
What are you going to compare it to?
I can compare it based upon just a level of comfort as to the documentation experience that they've had.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a comparison against
Right.
somebody else. It could be just simply a minimum bar that says they have what we're looking for.
Who would scratch your itch then, Gary? What would you like to see from him?
Stuff I mentioned earlier, just some experience you've had doing similar types of products, work we've had with talking to other town members who have worked with them as to the quality of the product, and also I do kind of want to see like if they've had, that they have actually produced a product, not producing it now, that's fine, but I'd like to actually see ones that have been done like 5 years ago.
That was your question.
And see something that is to like how it's working.
Or here's what I'd offer, some of those things, put down those written questions so we can get to Maren and get to him, and that way we can get a written answer, and we all see that answer.
Well, those are questions for Mark or MAPC,
Yeah,
that's
right.
fine. But in advance of that, what we've been asked to do was to look at the other examples of RFPs that were posted on the website, and I look forward to seeing the Hudson one. But just looking at that, to my mind, raised some questions of, first, it's funny, I started from the bottom of the list and worked up. So I've read Rubin, and I said, okay, that's okay, decent format, it leaves the burden on the applicant to kind of, to provide the ideas. It was, it covered all the obligatory stuff in a, fairly decent format. And then when I started to hit all the others, like, oh my God, they're all pretty much the same. It's just boilerplate, boilerplate. And they had towns that were like, or like Southbridge was justifying why you should do a planning process. Why the hell is that, in there? And other towns giving like histories of their towns and other, and then you had a place like Greenfield, which was, mayoral, where it was pretty clear, okay, there's a mayor there, he knows what he wants to do. All right, so he's read that way, that's fine. But a lot of it was just like too much boilerplate. It was a lot of uninspiring old hat thinking. I'd like to have an RFP that makes it clear that we're encouraging the applicants to be as creative as they can be, to present us with ideas, because rather than us, a room full of townspeople knowing what all the great ideas should be, how are they even going to know them until you see them? That's why you hire the expert to say, here's some options, here's something that just, is becoming hot out in, California or Indiana or Western Mass or whatever. Or here's something that was tried in several places and guess what? It failed. I'd like to see an RFP that makes it clear that we're looking for people to bring us innovative thinking, and then put the challenge of engaging the community. We've done enough planning exercises to know that the tough challenge is getting people engaged. What's your specific plan? So all of that comes down to how we write the RFP.
Correct. And
Doing nationwide searches and hiring a guy from
coming
Littleton.
off of this
Right.
call, you seem to be leaning towards RFP.
Oh, I make that clear from the start, yeah.
Paul, if I
And then
could.
importantly, how it's written.
Yeah, if
No,
I
I'm with
could,
you.
I think Paul hit the nail on the head, because when we review RFPs in certain situations, you can get 5 that are absolutely the exact same qualifications, and they all have the same kinds of presentations. And I'm sure these guys will fit into that mold very neatly. We want somebody better. We want somebody that thinks out of the box. Now, maybe there isn't anybody better, but we're never going to know that if we don't reach out.
But I'm trying to keep the scope of this particular discussion somewhat narrower.
Yeah, but
And
you
that
asked,
is how do
you
we-
asked if we
what-
were ready for a vote next meeting.
Yeah, the product that we want from whatever decision we make, that's a discussion also that goes on top of it, I believe.
So,
And I-
so if the RFP is going to give us way more insight into the options and our choices of people to work with, it's a very clear answer for me. If we're just going to say, hey, they're the guys, and we sign off on that, no way. They might be competent, but if we're going to have an RFP, they need to.
I'm not enthusiastic
Yeah.
about a guy that sits there and works for the government and that's already in the government,
I'm going to.
And maybe they're fine, but I want them to prove it in a competitive environment.
He did very well.
I'll be this caution.
He did, Paul was very, he worked for the
You invited
government.
Mark?
He did very
And,
well.
and
Allow me 1 second, Paul.
the we're cheap argument works when I'm out shopping for gasoline, but that's,
Well, we talked
Not
about
much
some
shopping for
economic
attorneys,
development that, you get what you pay for.
Well, I got to speak up a little bit because
Lips are moving.
Guys,
What's happening?
one speaker and the chair at the moment is trying to grab control of the meeting. If we all just hold on, please.
I think if we keep the scope of what our discussion is for the moment, and I'm going to ask you for the comment in a sec, and that is, are we going down the road, but then we don't need to critique too much, certain personalities or individuals, nor characterized because of where they may come from or who they work for. MAPC presented us with a lot of information tonight. It's stuff to, chew on, and that's how I'd like us to take that information, please. Gary?
Yeah, and just from my works for a federal organization, it's structured very similar to that it is, in that it did not get lump sum funded and has to compete and work for other project. All the money comes from projects. I don't want to cast aspersions to the fact that if someone works for a federal entity or a state entity or county entity or whatever it is, and that, they're a government hacker and they want on those lines. They have to compete for every money that they get in, so I appreciate their perspective of what they have to do. And but it's not an issue of being cheap. They would just simply put, for the same type of product that they would be producing, compared to a private industry, they might have the same level of pedigree of individuals working for them. Simply put, apples to apples, they don't have profit, the other ones do. So you can have the same level of quality. and just
Earlier,
have-
there was an attempt to derail the second $100,000 of funding we have so that we would only be in the range of hiring people who
Yes.
are available at $100,000. So that is really a
In terms of
consideration.
issue G&A and fee, G&A is there also.
Yeah.
The fee, whether it's 8%, 10%, 12%, numbers you're probably used to dealing with at the federal level, I might suspect, unless you've worked for some of the bigger corporations where they get 20%. But some of them too, when it's all said and done. That's not what they bid, but that's what it ends up
But
being.
I did have a question on the process, because I'm not familiar with the process of an RFQ for a town municipality like this. And I heard from Paul that he's looking for basically, our scope would be not very prescriptive and be very open-ended, and you tell us how you would approach this plan. We have an end-state product we're looking for, we want to hit these things, you tell us how you get there.
Yeah,
Can we do that in this type of process? Because it's not going to be apples and apples comparisons
You
between
asked a good
firms.
question, because do we write a SOW? Do we write a statement of work, project work statement, PWS? Do we write a SU, statement of objectives? Those are some questions that we can have too as we go through this process, whoever we use to help us write the RFQ/RFP. Are we asking for a quote? Oh, actually, we're asking for a proposal.
PDQ.
So it is a
The
PDQ.
governing statute is very broad, and I think the link's on our website. So you can see for yourself that, of course, public bid laws also dictate some of the pages in there. You know that stuff as well as any of the rest of us would. But beyond that, there's nothing that dictates that all of them have to look the same as these did. So I'm not opposed to having a document that's, 12 pages of some of the obligatory language, as long as the important first 2 pages make it clear, abundantly clear to the people there that we're looking to be impressed. We're looking to be impressed with new ideas. Here's the things we have doubts about. Here's the things we have concerns about. You come to us. We're not telling you what to do. You come and impress us with what your skills are, what new ideas you have, how we can overcome this challenge of getting people engaged. That's all I want, Gary, is to make sure that what we write for an RFQ makes that loud and clear up front, so that, performance time is when, these folks show up,
Was your proposal, I want to back to your proposals, was your proposals to have, at a bare minimum, this organization put together the RFP? Is that the idea?
My suggestion is that MAPC would assist us in the development of the RFP.
Okay.
For it to be bid, open, full and open competition across the broad spectrum of competitors.
Okay. Now,
That's my thought on this.
apropos of your comments, I've suddenly gotten worried about who does the RFP. Okay?
It's not, we don't just toss it across the transom.
I understand that.
That's the next step here, too. I believe a small subset of us working directly with MAPC to develop the RFP, after we have a little more discussion, it would seem appropriate now based on this conversation at the point. And then that way, and then it comes to all of us for perusal, and we actually end up voting on the RFP before it's released. So that we've all had an input. We will see what other kind of resources we bring into that to help us. Gary, some of the questions, I would expect you look at some of those proposals, or the proposals that we've been exposed to, and perhaps you call some of those government entities, the towns, and ask them some questions, your own personal questions direct. So I appreciate you coming back to us with any intel you glean from those kinds of conversations. But you're new with them, and your curiosity is very welcomed. And I know you know how to ask the right questions to those folks. So that's useful for all of us. I know some other people have already contacted, people outside of the town, and have spoken with them about these folks. And then others too. I would offer for your consideration, he has a relatively high turnover rate of folks at MAPC in his planning division. So that program that was written 5-8 years ago, as you suggest, you may well find this was perfect, and the person doesn't exist anymore.
It's very relevant, yes.
So just a thought there as, you know, we look at good information, and we weigh it all. So I'd like to bring this session to closure also now. At the very least, I will put on the agenda for the next meeting a vote. If you choose not to, and we're not ready, we don't vote, okay? But I'd like to have it on the agenda item, so that the public knows at the very least we're going to consider it and possibly vote on how we want to proceed. Not exactly the course of action, so to speak. Maybe I should say it that way. It is the course of action. It's not the specific task involved with that course.
Well, I also would like to get clarification as to what the nature of the procurement, is it an RFP, RFQ, you know, what exactly are we talking about?
I would say we're asking for a proposal, not a quote. And now,
An
with your-
RFQ is not a quote.
what-
Qualifications and RFQs.
well, okay, fair enough. I'm using federal
If
terms.
I could explain, I could explain the difference.
Go for the state
Please.
level, because we understand federal, you understand.
Reader's
state
Digest.
better.
An RFQ, request for qualifications. You send that out to the world, you end up with 20, 30 back. Out of that group of 30, you select the core group that fits your description of maybe 4 or 5. Those 4 or 5 are then invited to, through an invitation process, to send you an RFP, request for, so they will send, RFQ goes out, they send back a statement of qualifications, SOQ. RFP goes back out to them, or, RFP goes back out to them with the specifics, which are pretty much described in the RFQ, and then you get your proposals back from them. You get both a cost proposal and a qualifications-based proposal. You don't open up the cost proposal. You open up the qualifications proposal, then decide on who you're going to select, and once you've got that selection made, you open up your cost proposal, and then you try to negotiate a fee. Paul?
I was just going to say, I think the approach that you're talking about, the ordering of things anyways, is specifically valid when you're talking about, when the qualifications are a very real issue. Here, we're going to be addressing the world of planners, so I think what Myron is suggesting is putting out RFQ, RFP at the same time is just eliminating an unnecessary middle step. I mean,
It adds a complete step, and probably a
Yeah.
month of the whole process, so
Right.
6 weeks
I
of
mean,
the
is
whole
that
process.
kind of what you, well, what did you intend by that? That's how my interpretation was.
Whether you're doing RFP and RFQ at the same time or doing them sequentially, I can't imagine a Littleton group doing this without looking at the costs.
Right.
I can't imagine this group, just knowing you.
Excuse me?
Yeah, that being said.
Well, plus,
What were you saying exactly?
anybody applying knows how much money we have available too, so it's not, we're operating in the open on that whole thing.
Right. You bring the top few candidates in for a presentation, question and answer sessions, and you'll have the ability to contract, negotiate a contract with them.
My only point of distinction, though, is that I'm not sure, I don't know why there's what the value would be in doing it in 2 steps.
I don't think
given
there is
our-
any value.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
just winnowing it.
Sometimes there is. If you want to eliminate people who might be applying for a
Winnowing it
construction
down.
job when they
This
don't
is-
make the minimum
this is such a-
qualifications
yeah,
for...
This is such a specific task we're looking for.
Right.
What's the point of getting a proposal, though, if you're going to be negotiating with them?
Oh, it's part of the 30B process, yeah.
think
You get both, you get two.
Incentive fee contract,
Right, and actually,
where we
we'll have
negotiate the
to,
incentive fee
Okay.
at the federal level.
Okay.
So, everybody comes in with their proposals, and you evaluate the proposals, and then pick the ones you want, and then go negotiate.
That's right.
You do that at the federal level, too. And apologize, and
Okay.
thanks for clarification some of it.
Okay.
What you described, the RFQ, we call it RFI at the federal level, request for information. So, and if I mix
Okay.
those terms up, keep us straight, please, and thank you.
and
both of you.
everybody will help us through that process.
Yeah.
And if we remember one of the first document that she gave us that had the work schedule and
Step by step, yeah.
step by step.
And what I'd like us to consider, we had that conversation about whether it's price analysis or a proposal analysis, what order. We can make, within the law, we can set some ground rules for ourselves too, And we may well say, independent of cost, we will look at the proposals first.
Well, you have
Put the
to.
cost volume aside
You have to. You
and look at the
can't,
proposal.
you can't open up the cost proposal until after your major selection. 30B.
Huh?
You can't open up the cost proposals until after, Bonnie keeps those.
Construction.
This is professional services, it's different.
Oh, wait a minute, yeah, that's right, yeah, you're right, you're right.
Anyway, we will get a tutorial again before we start signing things.
Yeah, I mean, in the earlier question that Gary raised, I think is, we don't want to lose track of either, is whether or not, if we engage these folks to, help us on the RFQ, we don't want to unnecessarily screw them out of the chance to apply if we decide we want them to do that.
Right, and I think, we'll clarify that before the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so that I'm clear, next week, we're going to vote
weeks,
on,
2
2 weeks, we're going to vote on whether we have MAPC assist us with writing those.
Step one I would offer is, do we want to do RFP?
Okay, RFP, okay.
So it'll be a single question. And if we decide yes, and then we start digging down into the procedures and the specific tasks.
Right, and then we
about the
decide if we want
process.
them to help us
Yes,
do
sir.
that. That's the second vote.
Now,
Before, Rich, one sec. Is everybody, okay with that approach?
Yep, and I would, now that I've already done it, I can say this with authority. I think everybody would find value in going to the website and reading over all the,
Please.
the RFPs that are on there. You'll get numb after a while, because a lot of them are repetitive, but it's the minor distinctions that,
The
will
town
jump out.
website?
Yeah, our page.
It's actually on, yeah. and
One
the-
sec, one sec. Rich was next in line.
Please.
and the Mass Planners Association link too. Should, we have an opportunity to talk to Bobrowski.
Yes, and I'll get to that.
How does that connect with all of this?
Let me come back to that if I may, because we've already reached out to him. You know that.
Yeah.
And we'll tell you, Mary and I had a conversation on that.
Reach out to who?
A zoning lawyer, and I'll ask Mary to brief us because she knows it better than I do. But hold on before we get there. That's under our next steps. That's number 5, and we're just finishing number 2. How are we doing for time?
Step on it.
Outreach, liaison assignments. I had a thought, for what it's worth. Anyways, and that is for each of us to be a liaison to an active board here in town. So that we actually have somebody, with the rose pinned on ourselves, so to speak, so that we stay active with that particular board/committee. I would offer that those of us who are representing committees or boards already, we are already assigned to that particular board. Okay, is that good with everybody? Okay. No, you may not. Because there's enough for each of us to get 2. So, if you open up, you've all got that with your minutes. Oh, they don't? Oh, I'm sorry. Do they have it now? Can we get it to them? Do we have
I
it?
could run upstairs and make
Oh.
copies. I don't have.
All right, how about I run down it, and then you see. Okay, the ones that are already assigned, Melissa and I to the Board of Selectmen, Ed, EDC, Economic Development, Paul, FinCom, Rich, I got you already, you're 2, PMBC and the Planning Board, and Peter, Peter also.
Okay.
Mike, School Committee, Gary, Sustainability Committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to go down the blanks, and the first one that speaks up gets it. Agricultural Commission. Peter Scott. Board of Health.
Why are you so mad at the AdCom?
Fair
What did they do to you?
Fair question.
I'll take the Board of Health.
Okay. Community Preservation.
I thought we had a member on, we don't have a member who's already on that, right? I'll do community preservation.
Okay. Save the news for him until later. Conservation Commission. Peter, just catch on, I don't know if you heard it. We have the various committees and boards in town. Those of us who are already representing a particular board or committee, like you and Rich, the planning board, the liaison already to those boards.
Okay, so I'm out.
No, there's enough for 2 for all of us. And we'll save a surprise for you at the end.
great.
Conservation Commission?
I'll do conservation.
Surprise for me in the end.
If you're okay, I'll do Council on Aging.
Yeah, you're old,
Yeah,
right?
kind of appropriate, yeah.
Housing Authority?
Who's doing the aging thing?
I will.
Oh, you're looking to do it?
Yeah.
I'm older than you. Whatever you want.
Not by much.
Oh, lots.
We have members that aren't here either, if you want to.
No, I think we...
Yeah, we can tag
I
somebody
think we
else.
tagged everybody appropriately.
Oh, did you
Yeah,
now?
lodge.
So you already got a list out there, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
saying you
So
can
what
get
else did I
those either-
volunteer for?
Agricultural Commission contact.
Really?
Melissa Housing, thank you.
Just saying.
Library trustees.
I'll do that one. Library trustees? I think I know one or two.
Light and water.
Poor John doesn't have anything yet, gotta give him something.
John's got
Gary,
light-
too.
John's got light and water, thank you.
Well, if you get to BPAC, I was going to do, like, is that on there, or bicycle
Wait.
pedestrian?
Gary's already representing sustainability,
Yeah,
so we need
I-
a second one for you.
I can do, is there a bicycle pedestrian on there? Because I can pick up that
I
one.
didn't have it on there, I certainly could add it.
Okay.
But then you have to have 3, because you had it. That's your punishment.
You can't get what you want and call it easy. You gotta take something. you-
Bicycle, pedestrian, there's a group.
Okay, Gary, you got it.
Thank you.
Uh,
down the street.
Back to open space and rec.
That's good.
No, the open space.
Oh, this is open space and rec.
Committee.
Plan committee. Let's do that. John?
I'll do the fence viewing.
Okay, park and rec,
I'll do parking.
right? ZBA.
Who's chair of that now, any idea?
Oh. Is it not Sherry? I don't
Is it
know.
still Sherry?
Sherry, yeah.
Yeah, all right, I'll do that too.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so Gary added bicycle and pedestrian, and if there's others you think we should have representation towards also, just bring them up next week, all right? So you've got all the names?
I'll double check.
Okay, no.
This is Park and Open Space Committee.
There is an open space and recreation plan committee, is what it's called.
There are other committees in the town, just so you know.
True.
Right, but-
Right, what I tried to do was pick the ones that I know are active. If I've missed any, please, will.
Yeah, nothing comes immediately, well, there's things like the commissioners of trust funds and that kind of stuff, so I'm not sure if they want to be specifically involved in this process or not, but if you've already done that
I think we would be
vetting.
looking for committees that are either broad-based and policy setting, or address issues specific to what the master plan
Yeah.
is going to address. With the trustees, I think is more of a working group that just goes through like.
Should have phrased that as a
Yeah.
question,
Right.
whether those had been, that vetting process had already taken place or not. Sounds like it has.
Is Park and Rec in there?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And my rationale for this is, each one of these has a different demographic.
Right.
Constituency, perhaps a better word. Many of them overlap, certainly, between them, but there are some that library trustees, some folks very interested in the library, but would be very important to that outreach that we've already been talking about. So this is just one more of those steps. It's certainly not a panacea, but it begins to approximate some of those solutions we're looking for. I would offer that you're free to begin tomorrow morning in contacting the chairman of these boards, ask her for a little bit of time on your calendar, and then work out a relationship with that committee for periodic updates going back and forth with them. And that's a two-way street, please. And
Agriculture.
ensure they understand it's a two-way street. We're not there just to communicate or transmit. We want to be there to receive also. Okey-doke. Next steps, budget. You know we have $213,000, that's public information.
I think our next meeting should be in Arizona.
That's a good thought, but it's
The
summertime.
Cavasu?
But it's summertime, so it's not a great thought.
That's a nice lake. Alaska? We go
I
hunting?
was just thinking Alaska.
Alaska, this time
That
is
would be
getting
good.
nice.
This is salmon season coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to Newfoundland, it's better fishing up there. Good salmon up there.
All right,
It's
next
getting
steps, budget. We have Maren to pay. She's very kind to us and gives us great service, but we owe her remuneration, so she'll be part of that budget. If we use MAPC in some way, shape, or form that extends beyond some of these perfunctory measures, there'll be some budget there. And then, and Keith leave for the evening? Gosh dang it.
Looks like it, sounds like it.
Wanted to talk to him a little more, but the reason I asked about that is because, did anybody not receive, I guess the best way to ask this question, that proposal from MAPC back in March? Did we disseminate that? I just don't remember. I know I've seen it.
It was in the email that you forwarded last week.
Okay. So.
Yes, I got it, yeah, I just read it today.
So look at that and realizing that that was ballpark $100,000.
113, something.
Yeah, and see what that was going to, at least that they were proposing at that point. So you got one to bounce off already as to a product of theirs that's directly to us. And given 213, and that there'll be some subset of that available to be used, and I would offer as a ballpark figure, doesn't have to be the end game, $150,000 is we consider a budget for the master plan.
What are we basing that on?
Consultant. That's how much money we have available, costs that I think we may incur. And now, can we go back to town meeting and ask for more money? Certainly we can. But given the money we have to work with right now, and if after some conversation, say 150 is just a bad number, it's wrong, fair enough.
Well, I'm just thinking, before we decide what our target should be, shouldn't we see what it's been coming in at other communities?
True, but I'm offering that for the moment, is to begin thinking about a budget as to what's available to us. And if we think it's the wrong numbers, I say, it's okay, but it's a point of departure, is how I feel.
Right, okay, all right. I just think that the $200,000 figure was driven by some anecdotal evidence that that's what the market was bearing in communities around our size
True,
in
but-
recent years.
Pam, Aaron, and other staff support that may be necessary. MAPC in some way, shape, or form, they won't do, I don't think they will, at least we can put this to ground for sure, is to do the whole RFP process with us for free. There's going to be some costs incurred there, I should expect. So there has to be something short of 200. And
She wants money in the kitty for things that might pop up or additional meetings.
Incidentals and accidentals, those type of
yes,
things.
and every one of us knows how to bust a budget.
But if those sort of costs, ought to be properly considered, that shouldn't put us in a position of forcing us to a low ball,
It's not forcing us.
because we can go back in the fall at a special town meeting and get more money. I mean, we weren't necessarily done at 200,000, that was kind of the baseline.
True. And part of what's driving me to a little bit is first to begin being frugal, not foolish. And penny saved, a dollar spent, penny, how's it go? Penny foolish, penny wise, dollar foolish. Yeah. I mean, I don't want that, but I
Penny
want us
wise,
beginning
pound
somewhat
foolish.
frugal. And then when we can start justifying why it should be more, then that's fair. Okay? Okay. Mike?
In connection with the comment you just made and the assignments just given, as we approach the various boards and committees, and we ask for their input,
What the hell are you asking them?
that's one of the questions, all right? Input is one thing. Input, all right?
Hi, my name
But
is
the
Pete,
frame-
I'm your
but the fra-
representative.
But the framework for it, or shall we say the substance of it, has to be in some way related, obviously in some direct way. We have to be able to say to them, look, we want your input in order to fill in the blank. And I was just wondering, are we looking for a constant theme for all of us, or is it caution into the winds?
It's not caution in the wind. I would offer that it's the beginning, first off, developing relationships with some of these boards, and that you're present. And the first time you would go to them, I expect is, here's where we're at. And you can see, we know we're not that far down the road at this point. And then also is we're already seeking input. We've scanned the room. We know how many folks are out in the audience right now. And encouraging more people to come. And that gives us more brain power to come to this. And now, I believe that we start codifying some of that. And you say, now, at some point, this committee should have some sort of message that is within some framework, and that each of us as individuals, as we bring something different to the discussion, there's a variance on how that's presented, but a singular theme, if you will. We're not there quite yet. We talked last meeting about the buzz phrase, so to speak. And, so we didn't bring that up tonight, but it's something that's still in the back of our minds as to how do we want to present ourselves to the community at large. And I think we're still forming in that regard.
Well, I thought Mike's article last week was really good. I mean, if I get that as a Word file, I'd like to be able to send that out to parties just as a starting point.
I gotta admit, I never saw it, don't always look at the newspaper, but can you forward it around? I think that's a great suggestion, I'd like to see it.
What paper was it in?
Independent.
You can send it to
They
me.
still print that?
There was something about
I'll send
Littleton in
to you.
it?
Can you send me an email asking for it?
Really?
Between the two of us, we should be able to get this.
Wow.
All right. Would you speak about the conversation you and I had with the attorney, about the attorney?
Yeah, Mark Bobrowski, he's a land use attorney that literally wrote the book on land use in Massachusetts, land use law in Massachusetts. He's offered to come and speak with the committee. I would characterize the presentation that he wants to give as more of an implementation procedure. He goes through the town's zoning bylaws and in detail and presents to the town, to the committee he's working with, suggestions on updates. And he does this pro bono so the town can contract him to write those updates. He said that's his purpose for doing that. We were thinking about bringing him in to talk with you, but I'm wondering and the question is that something sooner or is that more of an implementation?
That's the first thing that jumps out on me. It sounds interesting, but where in the process would it be appropriate? And it sounds like, to me, initially, based on what you're saying, premature at the moment. And something that would be, as we're getting into the actual plan, that kind of input might be extremely edifying.
Yeah.
Well, in defense of the first part, if we do get him in here and he tells us these are the things you need to do, in your
RFP,
right, and then we turn around and say, okay, we're going to take these portions of him, and now we got the town planner. I don't know which horse is first.
Yeah, I tried to direct the questions to him so he would answer some of the early on questions that we've had, and he said, well, no, this is the presentation that I do. I look at your zoning and I tell you how to update it based on
But he
your
reads
master
all our bylaws before he comes to this meeting, and that's how he does all this, right? So, okay, but once again.
I think sort of like you think, Peter.
Oh.
That's not because it's
contagious.
we're on the same planning board together. It's, I thought that we could probably use him as a resource in helping us develop our RFP.
Yeah.
Well,
I tried to ask him to do that, and that's not what he would come here for.
That's why I'm saying I would think he's after the RFP.
Because he has such a wealth of information.
No question.
But he knows what he wants to sell.
Yeah.
That's not it. He wants to sell.
His time to you later, right, for a fee.
Right.
I say we bring him in first.
But why, that maybe we should ask him more directly, can you help us develop an RFP? We'll bring him in as a consultant just for one night to see what his
He's already going to come in and tell us for free already.
Yeah, and I
You
didn't
don't
see
worry
him
about
as
rewriting
how
stuff.
to write an RFP resource. I saw him as
How to write bylaws.
a resource of information on zoning, and that would help educate folks, those of us who haven't worked with the zoning all that much. You on the planning board obviously worked with it extensively. Well, sort of, you have. But anyway, very seriously, it seems that he has a narrow scope as to what he would like to discuss. He sees it as an opportunity to present to a town, and then the town thinks that he's good for business, and that to bring him in now as a paid staff member or a paid consultant. Initially, I thought very much early on in the process, unless we get him to deviate somewhat from what it seems his prepared script is, it'd be nice to hear, do we want to spend the hour?
But see, I think his prepared script is specifically targeted towards helping you rewrite your zoning. And I think I would hope that he would segue out of that to help us understand how master plans
Can help you rewrite your zoning.
yeah, because it's all about zoning. The
Right.
master plan is 100% about zoning.
Well, no, I wouldn't offer
Should be
that.
more than that.
And also, we will not write,
Lifestyle, too.
this committee will not write zoning laws or bylaws.
Oh, I know that, Paul.
This committee and the whole process is to help, where would we'd like the town to be? And then those various committees who have responsibilities for discrete tasks, the planning board, for example, now what zoning bylaws need to be adjusted, changed, rewritten, deleted, that helps see that vision? Now, I don't say that we need to be, or we should be ignorant of zoning, but it's not going to be our forte on this particular committee as to the zoning.
No, but
It's open the option of doing this a year from now.
maybe I didn't explain it, or maybe I didn't
Allow
explain
him
it.
So, I mean, is anybody here an expert at doing any of this kind of stuff? I mean, I've got no idea.
RFPs or RFQs?
Just what we're doing. This whole process of what we're doing.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Remember when the Olympics didn't get any money and they were called amateurs? We're not getting any money.
okay. So, my question to that is, does it almost seems like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse to me. Usually if I'm going into a situation that I'm not familiar with, I try to get more educated as to what it's all about. And we did this on economic development because we sat in that room, we kind of looked at each other and said, I mean, Paul had some experience and some other people had some experience, but there's a lot of holes to fill. And so we did a lot of data collecting and learning before we really came up with our end recommendation. Does that make sense for us to do so that we have a pretty good, I mean, it's obviously a longer process, but does that make sense? Get this guy in here, get this attorney in here, listen to what he has to say, because that, if there's 8 or 10 of us in the room, and people will pick up on things that he's saying, and somebody might hear something from him that another person, and if we hear from different people, we might really get some clarity as to what we're looking for. We don't even really have a baseline as to what the citizens of the town want.
Yeah.
So we're going out here, we're talking about getting a request for proposal, and we don't know what everybody in the town wants. And, being from, not being from here, I could probably go on about a million different things that people in this town want, but until we actually hear from them.
And see if other folks feel the same way, or thinking the same way in this. I don't see as we need to, at some level of knowledge, is what the town wants in an RFP.
Okay.
The awardee is going to help us determine what it is.
Okay, so they're going to work us through that process, and that's why we're hiring them.
That's correct.
I did have, following up on what Ed said, one thought about a category of folks that might be useful to have in early in the process before we make too many decisions. And that's folks, whether they're people who served on committees like ours in other communities who just did this or just completed a master plan process. And, if we could get 2 or 3 or 4 of those folks to come in at their leisure at one of our meetings to say, we just went through the 2-year process. Boy, you don't want to make this mistake. We did that. Or, we learned along the way that this is a big waste of time and this is a real important step. I'd like to have a couple of those folks in. And whether it's, Keith or, Tim Goddard, he's in the same business in another community. They have a network of these other administrators. I wouldn't want just administrators. I'd kind of want, citizens who serve in these committees to come in and give a little bit of feedback. So if we could get one of our, early summer meetings to have, dedicated to that, I think that could be valuable.
What would we come up with, 3 towns when you and I met?
Oh.
That might fit that?
Well, we just spoke of Hudson.
Well, we've got about 10 on our website, but that's not exhaustive. That's
Those are RFPs, right? Those are
RFPs, but they indicate communities that, actually, a lot of those are currently in the process, so we'd need to go back a little bit farther, the ones that have completed them. You'd probably have some, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you think of anybody, communities that have recently done it, otherwise, it won't be hard to find out.
And it'd be nice if it was somewhat local, because we're going to be taxing someone to do this for free, to come out here and not come too far away, so.
What was it, Shrewsbury? They just did one, because Scott, I can't remember his name.
Scott Lewis?
Scott Lewis had used an example from
Southborough.
Southborough, that had a master plan that they're having some success with, and they're about the same size and demographic.
Not too far away either.
Not too far away, so.
I think we even used them in our pay study as a comparable community, too.
Does anyone recall whether or not Newberry, the Newberry RFP attracted me a lot because it didn't have to squint too hard, and it sounded to me like they were facing some of the issues that we're facing.
Newberry.
Newberry.
I read it, I guess I did.
Okay, sorry about that, Blueberry. Okay.
No, it's Newberry,
Yes, it is.
And what they're facing, the difficulty they're facing is financial and competition for commercial resources nearby. They're outflanked, and they don't have money. In fact, reading it, squinting real hard, it sounds like a version of Littleton, except they're by the sea.
All the businesses go to Newburyport.
That's it. And it's not exactly the same, but they're thinking financial. And my personal bias from looking at what we're dealing with is, as we're planning, is in the back of my mind at least, is the resources that the town's going to need. This is, in other words, we're not here to make the policy or to tell people how to raise the money or how to make it more effective, but we are certainly creating the environment in which that's going to occur, at least that's what our aim is. And I think that when we reach out to the public, it has to be clear at some level or not, somebody, do you want to pay for this?
You know, the funny thing is that
And Mike, I would like it folks in who faced the structural deficit issue and also generally economic development head-on, realizing the world has changed and it's not all business as usual, literally and figuratively. So that's why I thought Newberry would be a
Yeah,
good victim to bring in.
And I guess when I read that their RFP, I was more
Yeah.
negatively struck that they were including too much information, like spoon feeding the consultants. I was looking with that eye, but as far as spotting a comparable community, I think you're
Yeah.
right. That's a similar issue. So maybe the thing we do is look for communities that have completed the master plan that have tackled that problem, or whatever. I mean, in any event, we should be talking to some folks that have completed this process.
Good point.
When would you like to bring him in? Or, you know, it was last Friday you and I spoke, and we talked like maybe one a night, you know? You don't want 2 or 3, and actually have maybe even 2 is not the worst thing in the
I think
world.
sooner versus later, because I don't want to go down this RFP process too much, and
Right.
because it's what
Start lining them up.
that's their information is going to affect that product.
Well, one of the questions that, we had discussed about going to these these other meetings, I've got the agriculture, so I'll stand and talk to a couple of these guys. But I still come up with the question is, where do you want Littleton to be in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 20 years? Now, I never really got asked that. I've asked dozens of people why you came here. I asked, what do you want to see out of this place? And a lot of them are still here that are in their late 60s and 70s. Their kids have been out of school for a long time. They vacation in Florida in the winter, and they come back again. Well, one of them just came back and saw the 40B down there, and he went, oh, my God. What's this going to do to the school? We're going to build a new school now? So we have to think about, where do we really want to be? And the people we got to ask is, where do you want it to be? And let it sink in. I mean, I wish I was asked this question 20 years ago. I really do.
What would your answer have been?
I still believe that I want to have a good balance, if not more industrial use in the town, to try and keep the tax rate down. I really think that that's what we need. We do have advantages. We got 495, we got Route 2, and we have the MBTA coming through town. So in that instance alone, we can get the people out of the city to come here, and I don't really want you to move here, guys, but, I'd like to have you come here to work, When was Foster Street built? When did all those go in?
80s, 70s.
Okay, so for the last 20 years, what has come into town in industrial use? In the last 25 years, what has come into town? We got the point now.
IBM came in, and they immediately, the reason they
How
came
long
in-
ago did they come in?
The thought isn't just industry, it's what we do with it. And this is a separate discussion, I'm sure. So,
Let's do this.
we don't really
up on-
practice economic development even when we have a chance.
Coming up
so.
on 9 o'clock.
Lights go out at
I
9.
think a very fruitful discussion this evening. Just a bit of a recap, we had MAPC, Mark Resicott from the Land Use Division. He's the director there. Gave us quite a bit of information, and obviously we've been able to ruminate over that quite a bit. We'll continue doing that. We've committed that if we have any questions, let's get them to Maren by Friday morning, please. So get those questions to Mark. He'll get us some answers before we have our next meeting on the 23rd. Anybody that certainly wants to do some personal research, going out to the various towns and cities around us as you think appropriate. Whatever you glean from that research, please share with all of us. And the way I'd like you to do that, please,
Yeah, through either through me.
and that's our edit, is some short notes, and it doesn't need to be long prose, but some short notes, get it to Maren, Maren will disseminate to all of us, and then, as we go with our next meeting, perhaps take a little bit of time, and you can expound as you think necessary, if you didn't think your short little crib notes communicated well enough for the rest of the group here, and those listening at home in the audience. We did, one of our outreach little exercises here is liaison assignments with the various committees and boards in town. We may well have missed some if we have. And when we say miss some, we know everyone that is on, that exists in the town is not on this list. And it's some of them because they just are not active. But perhaps this offers an opportunity to get one active also. That may not be. Who knows what seed we sow with another board or a committee. But if you think of one that you think we should be reaching out to, let's add it to the list, and we'll see who perhaps the most appropriate person to be that liaison to them. All right? We've had quite a bit of discussion on RFQ, and the definitions thereof. I still want to keep it on the agenda next week or next meeting, listing a vote. If we choose not to, fine by me. I just want us to have that option. Before I go to public input, any other comments?
Yeah, for the meeting in 2 weeks, we did send out an invitation to each of those boards and committees to attend your meeting.
And last night, the Board of Selectmen committed, they'll be here in force. We will be here in force, so to speak. Have we heard back from anybody else yet?
I wouldn't expect to hear back.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, as liaisons to these, you can plant that bug also, is that we're asking for their presence, because everybody serving on these is important. They're important to our town, they're doing important work for our town, and doing important work presently to lay down the future, and this is all about the future as to what we're doing here.
Clarification on the questions. I heard we're sending Marion the questions that we want to send to Mark. Do you want also questions you want to send to other towns as well? Is that a different thing?
I would offer, you're certainly free to share those with Marion.
Yeah.
I would not say that's obligatory. If you felt you wanted to call Swampscott, for example, because you saw this presentation this evening, you'll call on that and the questions you ask. All I'd ask is that whatever you glean from that, you should
Okay.
share with the rest of us.
All right.
And if you think you got a really great question that the rest of us should be asking other towns too, send it to Marion and she can get it out to us. Any other input for the evening, folks?
Good meeting.
Public input? Kirby, scan the audience one more time, please. Folks at home, folks who may watch this eventually on LCTV On Demand, come on down, please. Okay, who wants to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks a bunch, folks.
Good meeting.
So I know-